Hi everyone, welcome to the IoT Hero Show, my weekly showcase of thought leadership in the Internet of Things. My name is Tom Raftery, I'm the Global IoT Evangelist for SAP, and now, on with the show. Hi everyone, welcome to the IoT Hero Show. My name is Tom Raftery, I'm VP IoT SAP, and with me on the show today I have Andy. Andy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks for having me, Tom. Andy Bitter here, Evangelist for the analytics product set at SAP, based out of Germany in Hamburg.
Cool. And Andy, you're a recent hire for SAP, and your background is in kind of information management. And on the IoT Hero Show, we've talked a lot about the IoT, but we've never really talked much about the data side of things that all these things are creating. And this is your background, so I thought, how cool would it be to get Andy on the show and tell us a little bit about what we can do with all that data that the things are creating. So, yeah, Andy, what can we do with all the data that these things are creating?
Well, obviously there's a gazillion opportunities and use cases in terms of what you can do with all the data. So IoT, obviously for us, is no disrespect, but just another data source, right? So obviously it has a different dynamic because it's different type of data. Sometimes it's coming at volumes and at speeds at which typically we, from the BI analytics side, are just not used to. We're, for the most part, historically speaking, dealing with transactional data. So customer data, customer buys product X from store B, and so on and so on, which is typically very little volume-wise compared to some of the data volumes that are generated by either seismic data or meteorological or social media data, or anything that sensors, for that matter, kind of generate. So for us, this is a new opportunity to kind of maybe have a parallel view of our transactional world that we're used to, that we've been doing for 20, 30 years. And now we're having new insights, or we can generate new insights if we can combine our side of the world with the IoT world. And there are some really, really interesting kind of use cases that are generated from that. Not just by analyzing IoT data on its own, but by the combination of IoT analysis and in combination with some transactional data that can have to do with like cost of things and maintenance of things and customer behavior and all sorts of other kind of things that just bring up new use cases.
Cool. And I mean, we've had a lot of this data for a long time. What's changed now that we're in the IoT space, and are there new technologies, or what is it that's different now than say 5 or 10 years ago?
Obviously, I think Hadoop is probably one of the technologies that was enabling organizations to kind of leverage all that data that was actually generated. We didn't need Hadoop from our BI perspective in the past, but now with all the technology advancements and the speed of information generation from sensors and other kind of sources, I mean, that would really require a new view of what information management really means in the greater scheme of things. So it's not about the data warehouse anymore, but you may have data lakes. Some call them data swamps because you don't even know what's in there, and it's just so diverse that people actually have there, and just the sheer volume of information that is sitting in some of these data lakes. I mean, that's just mind-boggling. There's a few examples where we're really dealing with 100 petabytes worth of information just on metadata coming from sensors. And obviously not every single reading from a sensor is important, but I mean, you can sort of now analyze over time series and can predict certain things that were just not available to any kind of information management specialist there. So I think the interesting thing is that the technology advancements, not only on the software side and with new algorithms and with new storage capabilities and some of those things, but also the hardware advancements in terms of GPUs, TPUs, and I remember TensorFlow processing units. So some of these things that are just massively parallel and enabling us to kind of sift through these petabytes worth of stuff at amazing speeds that we just couldn't even think of a few years ago.
Cool. And so what would be some cool examples of uses of the data that are coming from the things that you've come across?
I can think of a few. For example, just the amount of, or the speed, I would say, the speed of information being generated, for example, in the seismic environment. So I spent a long time in the Middle East with some of these oil and gas companies there. And in the past, when you were trying to find an oil reservoir, for example, in the ground, I would think, okay, well, I mean, if I'm in the Saudi or in the Emirates, I would just dig a hole and there's oil. Well, maybe it's not that simple, but you still have to do some test drillings, right, to actually find stuff. Now you don't have to do any test drillings. What you do is you set up little explosions in the ground, and the seismic reverberation that is coming back just gives you sort of like a 3D model of the ground, and you need to capture that information really, really quickly. Because it comes to you at a speed of about a terabyte a second or something. So and if you don't grab it, it's gone. It's not coming back. So you need to have some technology that grabs this data really, really quickly to be able to kind of analyze it later on. Because you don't really want to do like a Swiss cheese kind of approach and drill holes. You want to just figure out where is the oil and then drill there. Or another example. Meteorological information. If I talked to a company that had wind farms, right? So some of these propellers that are kind of popping up everywhere. And I live in the north of Hamburg, so we got lots of wind, we got lots of propellers. So I thought, okay, you put these propellers where there is the strongest wind. Actually wrong. You want to put those propellers where there's the most constant wind. So because these propellers are sensitive to changes of speed. So what they don't like is very, very little wind and slow rotation and really fast rotation. So that kind of wears them out really quickly. And because the maintenance of these things is so expensive, they want to have something that's just rotating and rotating and it's sort of like a constant wind. How do you find that constant wind? You look at weather data from the last, I believe it was 80 years that were basically just collecting where is the wind coming from, at what speed, and so on. And they start analyzing that, and obviously then combining that with maintenance cost information to figure out at what location is the most constant wind, and that's where we want to put the propeller, not just where there's the strongest wind. So that data just wasn't available, or we weren't able to analyze that. So I think there is some really cool use cases now that we didn't even think about because nobody really had an idea that it was possible.
Wow, cool. So for organizations who are who are there, who exist today, what are the biggest challenges for them for accessing this data, for figuring out how to use this data, for getting cool info from this data?
I think I'd like to kind of pinpoint that to one thing, and that is has nothing to do with technology. It's really the lack of creativity to actually think about some of these possibilities, because they're to 80%, 90% of their budgets and resources, they're keeping the lights on. So I think they're just really bogged down in their daily work, and they don't really have the time or the creative people inside the organization to kind of start thinking outside the proverbial box. So the technology is there. We can do things that look like Star Trek. But in order to actually find those nuggets in your organization and how IoT or some of the new technologies on the predictive side or blockchain or some of those things, what do they mean to you as an organization? I think that's the big question. And that's why from our side and SAP, we delivered within the Leonardo kind of product set so-called accelerators, which are sort of pre-packaged solution sets, if you will, for a certain industry, whether it's retail or telecoms or financial sector or agriculture, to help organizations get off the ground relatively quickly. Now, these are prefabricated final solutions because you need to always put your secret sauce, what makes you different, because these are supposed to be digital innovation systems. And innovation is only something if it's innovative in the greater scheme of things from a worldwide perspective, if you will. If you're doing something that everybody else is doing, that's really not innovation anymore, right? This is just being a copycat. So that's why Leonardo, the value proposition is we're putting together the technology from the analytics side, from IoT, from I said blockchain and big data and all the kind of capabilities and all the quote-unquote buzzwords that are kind of floating around the industry. Put together that with your with a certain industry that you're working in, and some of the services components, because we from SAP can't do it all on our own. That's why we're partnering with the Accenture and Deloitte and Capgemini and some of the big systems integrators to help you at least get to a prototype stage where you can actually see what that would actually do for your organization. So within a depending on whether this accelerator is really fit for purpose for your organization, within the 6 to 12 weeks period, we actually have some ideation, some design thinking methodology that actually enables you to get to a stage where you can actually decide, is this something that we want to pursue, and does it make a difference for our organization and our customers?
Yeah, you mentioned creativity and data. And I was at Leonardo Live in Frankfurt a couple of months ago, and I was listening to the guy from Continental Tires talking about the remote vehicle data platform that they're setting up to take in all this data from connected vehicles. And he said that they have all this data from all these connected vehicles, and they were approached by a weather company. And he said it was completely left field. It hadn't occurred to them at all that they could use this data in this way. The weather company wanted the external temperature data from the cars so that they could get hyper-local weather information. And also they wanted the windscreen wiper info as well from the cars. So that's another left field use of the data that they have already from all these vehicles. So yeah, you're right. The creativity, it's really interesting.
Yeah, there's a similar example. It has to do with trains, the Swiss trains service. They were partnering with I think it was Swisscom, so the telecom operator. And what they did, and I'm not sure whether it's kind of a privacy or security concern elsewhere, apparently in Switzerland it's not, by which they were tracking cell phones, right? They didn't know whose cell phone it was, but they were tracking your cell phone that was just logged into a certain cell tower. And then obviously, if you're boarding a train, that cell phone starts moving. And moving very quickly. So and if it's moving along the track, that person with that cell phone is on that train. And obviously, once that cell phone stops moving, you're left the train. So what they then did is they obviously had a model by which they actually were following, I guess, millions of cell phones moving along that track. And then they also were looking from the telecoms operator to where 3 hours before they boarded that train and 3 hours after they left the train, where was that cell phone? Which gave them a model where these people either worked or lived, and that helped them maybe get an idea of maybe we should actually extend our rails to a certain community, because there are so many people actually commuting from place A to actually the train station to actually board the train. So it's a combination of location information, of cell tower triangulation, mobile phone, and maybe strategic information for the railroad company. So that combination is I think is fascinating. What people actually come up with as ideas.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. So last question as we wrap up here. What do you think is the outlook for the next 5 years for information management? Where is it all going? Because we can see that as more sensors are being deployed, and we're talking about maybe 20 billion or 50 billion, depending on whose numbers you listen to or believe, devices are going to be connected, which means we're going to be getting way more information coming in all kinds of organizations. So how are organizations going to deal with this, and what's going to be the next big thing in information management to help people?
Oh, the next big thing? Oh man, that's a question. I don't. If I knew that, I mean, I wouldn't be sitting here. I'd be rich already. That was unfair. No, I think we're just getting started, right? So obviously, some companies are really innovative and are using that information already today. And I think the challenge for those who are quote unquote in the Stone Age, I mean, they really need to get their act together to actually come up with something that enables them to kind of survive, because I think there is an opportunity for a lot of disruption. And if you're not the disruptor, you will probably be disrupted, which is not something that you probably will enjoy. Either you're going out of business, or you will be acquired, or something. So I think there's an inherent danger that many organizations are just sleepwalking through this whole environment. So I think the one thing that I think CEOs, CIOs, or chief digital officers, or whatever their name then is really kind of start brainstorming with workshop with their users on the not just on the IT side, because IT is just the enabler. This is really something that is benefiting the people in sales and marketing and production and on any other kind of line of business, to help them get to the proverbial next level in their organization, or maybe completely change their business, change their behavior, change their kind of market approach. And the way to do this is really trying to find that creativity inside the organization. If they don't really find these people, get outside views from the likes of the Leonardo teams or some of the systems integrators, because we don't know where the next big challenge or threat will be coming from in most organizations. If you think about what some of these organizations such as Airbnb, Uber, Amazon have done to their respective industries, I mean, it can be sometimes frightening if you're one of these established kind of players in this space. So nobody's safe, right, in that sense. So you better do something, and doing nothing is probably the worst option that you can actually take.
Awesome. Andy, that's been fantastic. Thanks a million for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.